If you wanted to find the finest array of sporting machinery that has ever gathered together for one event, there is only one possible place on Earth to look. Every year, in the rural countryside of southeast England, the most extraordinary event in the motoring calendar takes place. For this is Goodwood House, host to the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and the 70,000 people that will flock here to see the hill climb through its grounds. It's a real family event, and by no means restricted to speed fanatics alone. The greatest names in motoring are here too, from Sterling Moss and Dennis Jenkinson, to the American ace Dan Gurney, and British sports car racer Derek Bell.
Thank you. How are you then? I just over there.
Other familiar faces abound too. With 150 unsilenced exhausts, it's good to come prepared. It's Saturday morning. We've got 2 days of the fastest cars from the turn of the century to today, from Formula One cars to old cars to supercars to cars like this Porsche 550 Spider. It's going to be an absolutely fabulous event. I'm driving this car. I'm also driving a Porsche 911 Turbo. It's going to be wonderful. The course is very tricky. It's quite slippery. It's very tight. There's a lot of room to make mistakes, but it's not my car, and I'm going to be going quite carefully.
A lot of people ask me why I don't drive the car myself, but having went through a year when I hurt myself on a motorbike and I couldn't drive, I lent the car to someone and I found I was just as happy watching from the sidelines and actually not getting nearly so nervous about the whole racing procedure. So I now find I'm just as happy for anyone else to drive it. And Andrew Frankel's a professional driver, so you know he's in good hands.
So it's time to leave the safety of the paddock and head out for the start line at the beginning of the hill.
There he is.
The course itself is just over a mile, or 1.6 kilometers long, and is very, very fast and unforgiving. Mistakes are punished if you're lucky with a slow time. If you're not, it might be a trip into the hay bales.
It's unlike a racing circuit because A, it's too narrow, there are no curbs, and so therefore on a racing circuit you can at least feel when the cars get into the edge of the circuit. Here you can't, because if you go on the grass you're in real trouble.
The lights are green. It's time to go.
Okay, we're flat down the straight now. I'm going to grab fourth braking for the most difficult corner on the track, which is a very, very tight hairpin right-hander coming up here. You just can't see the thing until you're right on it. Second go in this car. In we go. There's a wall in front of you. It looks like the track turns left. In fact, it turns right. Dab on the brakes. Right there. Clip the apex as close to the wall as you dare. There's a flat right-hander corner coming up now before getting to the finish, which you can see up here. Going over it just as we grab fourth. And that is one run of the Goodwood Festival of Speed hill climb.
On the other side of the house, another display was grabbing people's attention.
Goodwood is so much more than just fast racing cars. There are some fantastic road cars here, the finest supercars in the world. This is the new TRRL Cerberus. It's got 350 horsepower. It'll do 170 miles an hour. This, the Porsche 911 GT2, is simply a road-going version of a Le Mans car, fantastically involving to drive, a really, really fine motor car. This is an incredibly rare bird. It's the Mercedes C111. It's a prototype that never went into production. I think they only made 6. But it's extraordinary to see it here. And this is the fascinating-looking Lister Storm. At Goodwood, as you can see, it really is all here.
For £9 a head, you can have a wonderful day here. There's so much to see, motorbikes, cars, everything for the family. Bring your picnic here, have a wonderful day here.
It was a marvellous day, good old memories back, and we hope to be back next year.
Well, there's something for everybody. There's something for the old, the young, and anyone in the middle like me.
What does this all add up to? If you like motor racing or just a marvellous weekend away, it's simply the greatest show on earth.
In this large and ugly building in central London, the cream of Europe's car designers are trained. Michael Harvey reports.
A hot, balmy night at the end of a long, balmy year. And for the students of London's Royal College of Art, tonight's the night when all those long evenings, Saturdays and Sundays, working on their final year projects will pay off. Over the next 12 hours, these students will discover whether they've got jobs in the industry or not. Responsible for their selection and training is the designer of Bentleys and Aston Martins, Ken Greenlee.
The qualities that we look for in students joining this course starts obviously with a high level of individual creativity. We also look for high intellectual abilities as well. We're also concerned about whether they will actually graduate as professionally independent designers. And we have a pretty good track record in that. 98% of the graduates of this course are employed somewhere in the world as an automotive designer. Just about every one of the world's car studios employs an RCA graduate.
Final year projects range from model coupes and microcars to full-size motorcycles. And some are closer to reality than you might at first think.
What I try to do with this car is more like we did with the 50s and 60s with cars like the E-Type Jaguar, to really bring the emphasis from the racing car industry onto the car.
Can you show us the race car technology in the car, please?
Yeah, we have the aerodynamic under tray which sucks the car onto the ground.
Yes,
we have the side chassis members exposed, and then we have, on the interior, we have a filament wound tube, pressurized tube, and more towards the front of the car we have details like the shock absorbers exposed visually, with very nice technical details.
How long have you had this project inside you then?
Well, I started the project 9 months ago with a basic idea for the chassis, and then it's been the last 9 months working hard on it.
It's an idea Lotus and Renault are already working on. And another familiar face. This one, an alternative to the brand new MGF.
Well, the real car is a mid-engine sports car. This one's front-engined, slightly more traditional format for an MG. And it changes the way the thing stands. It has its weight at the back, the wheels are forward, and all the features back, and it has a windswept appearance.
And tonight, are you optimistic of landing a contract tonight?
I think so. Things are looking good. We worked very hard, very tired.
Yes,
but
sure.
Seem to have had some favourable comments so far.
The formal part of the evening is the presentation to the Star Student of the Year. But that's not why people come here. In this room with me tonight are the design directors from Fiat, BMW, Jaguar, Lotus, Aston Martin, Audi. We could go on all night. The fundamental point is this: if you run a design studio for any manufacturer anywhere in the world, you make sure you're here this evening.
A person that you see today at the show might be an employee in 5 years. So the industry is so small that you keep track of these people.
It's very difficult to find other instances to evaluate a designer. You can't take every designer and employ them. You'd like to. Sometimes you have to risk and go exactly on how you feel from what work they've done in the school.
Surely.
So it's very important the work they do here.
We're looking for guys, they have to be money-making right from the word go. Yeah. So we're looking for, we don't want conservative people, but they have to have imagination, but they also have to be sensible enough to fit in straight away.
You're looking for talent, you're looking for something that is relatively subjective. You've either got it or you haven't. The Royal College of Art invariably has people that has got it. Having said that, it still takes, when we take people in from the college, it's going to be 2, 3, maybe even 4 years before they even get near a full-size clay model. Yeah. But what we're looking for is the way they allude to the ability in terms of their design techniques, etc.
Heady stuff. I haven't picked up my crayon since I left school. Time to make myself scarce, I think.
Close to the Arctic Circle, some of Europe's biggest car companies test new developments in the most arduous conditions. Temperatures here can sink to 40 degrees below. But even on a frozen lake, it's impossible to make this car skid because it's fitted with a revolutionary electronic stability program, ESP.
Where the system really starts to make a difference is at speeds even on sheet ice of 50 miles an hour, you can actually steer with the ESP system, and the car will automatically cope. Take it off, and you skid all over the place.
The car on the right of the screen has the system fitted. The car on the left doesn't. It works like this. A sensor on the steering wheel tells the computer the driver wants to go in the direction of the ghost image. A sensor on the wheel says the car's skidding. So the computer automatically puts the brake on one of the back wheels, putting the car safely back on course. But there are fears that fitting fast cars with airbags, anti-lock braking and now this will encourage bad habits.
The one worry about the system is that there are a type of driver who will use this sort of backup system as an excuse to take extra risks, to go faster than he does now in conditions where he wouldn't drive fast now.
The car makers reply that for the majority of drivers, this sort of technology could literally prove a lifesaver.
Coming up after the break, what you need to know before buying a cabriolet, and on test, 3 Japanese mini cars packed with tech.
In Osaka in Japan. Gridlock is a daily occurrence, and driving just 5 miles can take on average 2.5 hours. The situation has got so bad that anybody without an approved parking space isn't allowed into the city centres. Unless, that is, you drive one of these. Called K-Class cars, they're all sub-mini sized and have 3 or 4 cylinder engines no bigger than 660 cc's. Sounds like the Japanese fun police have had their way, doesn't it? Absolutely not, if these 3 are anything to go by. These K-Class cars must measure no more than 3¼ meters long by 1.5 meters wide. They're so small, in fact, you could virtually park one in the back of a Ford Transit van. So to the Dangan, or Bullet, the most practical of the microcars. Functional on the outside, but underneath that bumblebee exterior lies a serious sting. The car's engineering makes the British Mini look Jurassic. Despite the external dimensions, there's still plenty of room for 4 to potter around in comfort. It's a tall little car, which you might think would lead to a lot of body roll when cornering, but with permanent 4-wheel drive underneath, it sticks to the corners like a boiled sweet to a blanket. The Dangan isn't a caricature. It's a serious stab at a town vehicle, and it works. Fancy an off-roader instead? Well, here it is, shrunk to perfection by Mitsubishi, but jam-packed with all the features you'd expect on the full-size version. This is a halfway house between a Tonka toy and the real thing. The Mini Shogun has to be the cheekiest of the trio. It raises more than 2 fingers at the urban farmers, and with its pint-sized profile, it draws a standing ovation from the curbside. What the Japanese did for the personal stereo, they've done for this car. Put a full-size Shogun in the hot wash, and it will come out looking like this. 44,000 of these were sold in its first month of being on sale in Japan, wildly outselling the full-size version, both there and in Britain. The Japanese have really taken this car to their hearts, even though there's not a lot of off-roading going on in downtown Tokyo. But if you really want to prove small is beautiful, the Suzuki Cappuccino is the one to do it in. It's a tiny 2-seater sports car some see as the natural successor to the classic MG Midget. And incidentally, it's the only one of the 3 you can buy here in the UK. The Dangan and Mini Shogun must be personally imported. Well, this is certainly the antithesis of all those hairy-chested sports cars. This is machismo for the educated enthusiast. It's got rear-wheel drive, a turbocharged engine, and a really weird kind of offbeat sex appeal. It's a horrible cliche, I know, but it still feels like a go-kart. The steering is absolutely superb, pin sharp. The engine, well, it just revs and revs, goes to 8,500. It's perfect for darting around town. In these narrow streets, you can place it really accurately, and parking's a doddle. Although the Cappuccino meets all the current safety regulations, you still feel very small and very vulnerable down here. Driving in traffic, you're always aware of vans coming up close to you, and lorries are a real no-no. So what about it? Are these microcars serious town transport or just a bit of fluff? Well, they're okay for high days, holidays, and as second cars. But you better get used to people looking down at you.
Suddenly, safety isn't boring anymore. Car ads no longer boast about performance. They parade safety features, not more so than side impact bars. Almost every new car has some kind of side protection. But now safety experts are questioning how well impact bars built into the doors of cars protect motorists.
I built this car originally to show how well you could build a car for side impact.
Professor Adrian Hobbs designed the car at the government's transport laboratory. The logic seemed obvious. Strengthen the doors and you'll protect the occupants.
What we did was to make the sort of mistakes that everybody's still making. We made a very strong car. Unfortunately, when we tested it, we found a very strong car doesn't offer the sort of protection that we thought it would do.
Hobbs tested this super strong car with a steel plate down the side. His results showed the reinforcement did little to reduce injuries. Even more surprisingly, a weak door does protect. The door bounces off the striking object and hits the driver. It looks violent, but the impact carries the force of the door alone. A reinforced door bounces less, so the driver is hit with all the force of both the door and the striking car, and suffers greater injuries. Car makers Volvo first fitted side impact bars 20 years ago. They say their current design reduces injuries by 25%. But it involves a lot more than just side beams.
I think there's a bit of a tendency for people to quickly get themselves some safety credentials. And one of the quick and easy ways to do that is to put beams in the doors. But that alone isn't enough.
Nevertheless, Volvo and other car makers claim side beams, although not enough by themselves, are an integral part of side protection. And now there's a new urgency about this whole debate, because at the moment, car makers have to test only for head-on impacts. However, from next year, new European regulations mean that with the help of this dummy, EuroSID, they'll also have to test for side impacts. Already there are rows about the test. Safety experts say car makers are trying to water it down by lowering the height of the test ram.
Well, it depends what you mean by watering down. If we take the opposite view and say that the legislators have been trying to make it more severe, then there's got to be a compromise between making it more severe in order to get safer vehicles and making it more severe than is necessary to generate safety benefits on the roads.
Investigators who've looked closely at thousands of real accidents over the past 10 years say with side impacts, car bumpers ride over the sill and hit the door. So if the test rams are lower, they won't be realistic. Every year, 23,000 motorists are seriously injured in side impacts and 600 die. The crunch for the European test and for side impact bars will come next year when it becomes law.
It's a very seductive kind of car, the Cabriolet. You just cut the lid off an ordinary standard saloon and you've got a car which makes every journey memorable. You catch the sun, you catch the air, you can smell the surroundings as you go past, new mown lawn, all that sort of thing. But the trouble with the Cabriolet from the engineering point of view is that the whole concept is flawed. The body itself is about half as rigid as a normal saloon car, which means that all the stuff around the perimeter, this windscreen frame, the steering column, they all move over bumps. You'll notice the mirror going sideways. You'll notice this moving around. And the problem is caused by this lack of rigidity in the body. The way this manifests itself is in the way the car steers and handles and rides. You can literally feel the bending going on in the body. In a normal car, The relationship of the wheels to the surface is very critical. It's measured in minutes, not degrees. And in a car, when the body's flexing, the attitude of the wheels changes too, and it's reflected in the handling and the ride. I've always wanted to like cabriolets. The concept seems so attractive. But the first one I ever drove, 20 years ago, was terribly disappointing. And since then, I've never found one that was really impressive for road holding or steering. What you need to understand about cabriolets is that they're expensive. This Saab here costs 30% more than the equivalent tin-top version with the same engine and the same equipment. And it's not really a four-seater either. There's room for 4 people in it, all right, 2 in the back. But the fact of the matter is that if you try and do 70 miles an hour down the motorway, or whatever speed you do, you'll find that you'll behead your passengers with the wind. And take a look at this boot here. As you can see, the hood space intrudes very much into the boot. They're all like that. It isn't just a Saab. Look at a Golf, look at a Peugeot, they're all the same. You will not get much holiday luggage in there. These electric hoods are all the rage at present, and they make a great piece of street theatre. But there are half a dozen electric motors in here, and what happens if one of them goes wrong? Hoods have a finite life too, much shorter than the cars. They take quite a bit of looking after. When you've got the hood on, you're still talking about a lot of compromises. These cars are noisy on the motorway. They all are. Look behind me. You'll see that rear visibility is terrible. And if you live in the city, you'll know that cabriolets are often vandalized by people trying to get access to the radios inside. And if you need a new hood, it costs thousands, not hundreds. The whole problem is cabriolets are compromised and there's no way to look around it. The cabriolet's problems are all summed up by this shoebox. See this? No lid. Flexes all over the place. Put the lid on. It becomes a saloon. Extremely rigid. That, in a nutshell, is the problem with a cabriolet. I'm not saying they're bad, but you need to know. What's the bottom line? Fresh air's great, but cabriolets are far from perfect.